The following is the workflow of the QAQC department. Production sampling was conducted at the sample post. Samples were taken from each dump truck that stopped at the designated place at the front of the sample post. When the dump truck stopped, Sampler 1 lowered the ramp door, then Sampler 2 sampled the dump truck at 3 different points, in accordance with the applicable SOP. The samples were then put into sacks. One sack can be used for a maximum of 5 collections from each passing dump truck. Samples that have been placed in sacks are then sent to the laboratory. The laboratory team received and started matching the ID and number of samples. If it is correct, the team immediately performs the preparation. 1 sack of samples, 5 dump trucks, were sifted using a 20 mm screen to separate soil and rock materials. Large samples, rocks, are crushed with a hammer in order to get an evenly sized material particle size. Rock samples that have been crushed, mixed again with the material from the sieve. Then mixed by 2 manpower using a shovel at least 3 times. The samples that have been mixed are arranged in a matrix with a division pattern of 6 by 5 boxes. Then the samples are taken using a 30D scoop in each box. After the entire sample has been prepared and combined, the entire sample results will be subjected to the final mixing process, then divided into a matrix with a division pattern of 4 by 5 square sections. After dividing the matrix into several sections, then sampling is carried out using a 15D scoop on each section of the matrix box. Sampling at the final stage of wet raw material preparation produces as many as 3 types of samples, which are wet duplicate sample, MC sample, and wet process analysis sample. Duplicate wet samples are kept as an archive, so that when sample data with the same ID is needed, these duplicate samples can be used for further preparation to obtain comparative results. MC, moisture content, samples are oven dried for approximately 16 hours until the dry weight of the sample is met, and ready to be weighed and the moisture content is calculated. This MC sample is representative of each dome in the stockpile. For wet process analysis samples, these samples were oven dried until completely dry for 12 hours. After the samples were dry, the samples with the same ID were combined, then reduced using a 3 mm blade size crusher. After the sample is crushed, and getting sample results with an even particle size, the sample will be split using a splitter. After the sample is split, 2 parts of the sample will come out, which are dry duplicate samples, which are kept as archives, and dry process analysis samples. Dry process analysis samples are then made into pulp samples. The dry samples were put into an iron bowl, which contained a bowled crusher. The bowl was then put into the ring mill for approximately 5 to 6 minutes. After the analysis sample is processed using a ring mill machine, the sample is then poured into a tray and mixed using a 1D scoop. The sample is flattened in the tray, then divided into a 4 by 3 matrix. The rest of the sample was put into plastic and used as a duplicate pulp sample. Then the sample on the tray is then taken per matrix box and then sifted using a 200 mesh sieve. The sample is sifted with a quality of 95% of the sifted sample, passing the 200 mesh. The sieved samples are mixed, put in plastic and then shaken. After the sample is mixed, the sample is poured into a small tray, then leveled and made into a 4 by 3 matrix. Samples are then taken per box with a 1D scoop and randomly separated into 2 sections, which are duplicate samples and QS, quality sample, samples. QS pulp samples and duplicate samples were scooped out in small portions using a 0.25D scoop and placed into pellet cups. The samples are then weighed and must have a net weight above 8.25 grams. Each cup must be assigned a sample ID, and then the sample cup is ready to be processed on the pellet press. The sample is pressed with a minimum pressure force of 10 tons. After processing using the pellet press, the samples can then be analyzed on the XRF machine by adjusting the ID and the daily report database. Each sample cup takes approximately 6 minutes, 1 hour in total, to analyze a total of 10 cups per session. That is the work process of the QAQC department. We apologize if there are any mistakes in the sentences or words displayed in this video. Thank you.